Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about adrenal hormones and just do an overview of where they come from in the adrenals and what triggers them and a little bit about them. So to begin with, the adrenal glands are located above the kidneys, and they're these pyramid-shaped organs with 3 layers in the cortex and a central medulla. Now, the 3 layers of the cortex are the zona glomerulosa, which releases aldosterone, the zona fasciculata, which releases cortisol, and the zona reticulata, which releases androgens such as testosterone. So a memory aid that I use to try and remember the layers of the cortex is GFR, which also represents glomerular filtration rate in the kidneys. So G is for glomerulosa, F is for fasciculata, and R is for reticulata. Then in terms of my hormones that are released, I remember it as salty, sweet, sexy. Salty for aldosterone because it affects your sodium in your blood. Sweet for cortisol because it affects your blood sugars. And sexy because androgens are sex hormones such as testosterone that's released from here. When it comes to the medulla, you just need to know that adrenaline, or epinephrine is also known as, or noradrenaline or norepinephrine is released from here. And the way you can also remember this is that the word adrenaline and epinephrine literally translates to above the kidneys. So ad is Latin and epi is Greek for above. And then renal in Latin for adrenaline and nephrin in Greek for epinephrine for above the kidneys, or near the kidneys to be more precise, given that ad technically means close to or near. In regards to the controls of adrenal hormones and what causes them to be released, it all starts in the brain at the hypothalamus, which supplies the anterior pituitary. So the key hormone here is adrenocorticotropin hormone, which is stimulated by corticotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, stimulating the anterior pituitary to release the ACTH. This stimulates the zona fasciculata and reticulata, the fasciculata being cortisol release and the reticulata being androgens such as testosterone being released. It's important to mention here, though, that testosterone is also released from the gonads as well, but this is stimulated by luteinizing hormone. So luteinizing hormone will stimulate the gonads or the ovaries to release testosterone or estrogen. And luteinizing hormone also comes from the anterior pituitary gland. ACTH also stimulates the zona glomerulosa, but it's a minor role for aldosterone release. The key determinants for aldosterone release are actually angiotensin 2, which is part of the renin angiotensin aldosterone system, increased potassium in hyperkalemia, because aldosterone will exchange potassium for sodium, so you'll lower your overall potassium levels in your blood, and acidosis, which acidosis is associated with hyperkalemia, and lastly, ACTH, as you mentioned, as a minor role. Lastly, the adrenal medulla is a neuroendocrine organ, meaning that it contains modified nerve endings or nerve tissue that secretes hormones directly into the bloodstream. It's innervated by the sympathetic nervous system, and unlike the rest of the sympathetic nervous system that has short preganglionic and long postganglionic, the preganglionic neurons directly innervate the medulla and release the neurotransmitters into the bloodstream. The sympathetic nervous system is largely automated because it's part of the autonomic nervous system, but it's regulated by the hypothalamus. So when stimulated, it will release adrenaline and noradrenaline into the bloodstream, which will have effects on alpha and beta receptors, with your alpha receptors mainly leading to vasoconstriction of arteries and veins, while the beta receptors mainly have their effects on the heart with increased heart rate and increased contractility. So it's worth mentioning here as well that many of these processes work in negative feedback loops. For example, cortisol release will inhibit further release of corticotropin releasing hormone, which will inhibit adrenocorticotropin hormone, which will reduce the amount of cortisol being released. And the other hormones work in a similar way. So that summarizes the adrenal medulla, the hormones released from it. We've talked about a memory aid for remembering the different layers with GFR, and a way to remember the different hormones with salty, sweet, sexy, and then lastly our catecholamines, which is our adrenaline and noradrenaline, and a way to know where they come from and remember where they come from. So I hope this video was helpful in remembering that. And if there's anything you want me to cover, don't forget to let me know in the comments and also subscribe to the channel.